Our plan was simple. Leave Germany to travel the world and only return if we got tired of traveling or run out of money. This trip took us to 18 countries in 20 months. We got to see the most incredible nature, experience different cultures on 4 continents, and also went through a couple tough challenges. The first place we got to see after purchasing a one-way ticket was Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Brazil is gigantic and incredibly diverse. We saw the mountains, beautiful colonial architecture, huge cities, and white beaches, but for sure the highlight of this country were the incredible Iguazu Falls, one of the 7 wonders of the natural world, where up to 13,000 cubic meters of water fall down every single second. And let me tell you, standing on the edge, you can really feel it. Making our way south, we ended up in Buenos Aires next, and we're taken completely by surprise. This city is so much fun. We knew almost nothing about Buenos Aires, but fell in love with the vibe so quickly that we ended up staying for more than 2 weeks. This is also where I had a very unplanned root canal surgery. Going to the dentist in a foreign country was very much not on my bucket list. There is one country in South America that almost no one seems to talk about, and that is Uruguay. I think the reason is that there are no major sites and that it is pretty expensive to visit. In Uruguay, we saw a couple places along the coast, then spent some time in a tiny house close to the beach, which should have been amazing, but was somewhat ruined by the amount of mosquitoes in this area. The real reason we wanted to start our trip in South America, though, was Patagonia. Simply saying that word makes you think of adventure, doesn't it? Well, it's very true in this case. This region is incredibly remote, very rugged, raw nature. There is very little people and endless wilderness, or steppe as it's called. Honestly, it was everything we had imagined and more. We loved Patagonia so much, but this was also where we encountered our first big challenge and ultimately failed. The W track is one of the most famous multiple-day hikes on the planet, and we got into the idea of doing it, but we were just not up for it. I especially struggled a lot with carrying the heavy backpack containing equipment and food for a week, and we were super unlucky with the weather on many days, which can be truly crazy in Patagonia. We were cold and wet all the time and eventually decided to quit on day 4. Many people focus on the south when they are speaking about Argentina and Chile, but we found the north to be just as interesting. We rented a car to travel through northern Argentina for a couple weeks. The landscape there could not be more different. It's a desert and it sometimes felt like we were walking on the moon. This is also the kind of place where you barely meet other tourists, and if you do, they will be Argentinians from a couple 100 kilometers away. So this was also where we really got to practice our Spanish skills. We eventually drove over to Chile again, where we got our first visitor from Germany, which was amazing. It felt so good to have someone with us from home, someone we had known for a long time and had a shared history with. We explored the Atacama Desert with a small car, and again, nature did not disappoint. This is the driest place on Earth that is not a pole. There are volcanoes, sand dunes, and geysers, and all of this is happening on high altitude, which of course meant we were all hit by altitude sickness pretty bad. This spot is on so many people's bucket lists and had been on ours for many years, so of course we had to go to Salar de Uyuni, the biggest salt flats on Earth. This place is surreal in so many ways and is one of those things that can only be experienced not described. After Uyuni, which looks great but is in fact very cold and uncomfortable, we went to Bolivia's capital, Sucre, for a full 3 weeks to get rid of our colds, and we could not have picked a better place to rest because not only is Sucre insanely beautiful and has so many things to see, but we also got to meet this little guy. This dog honestly made us want to get a dog. We loved him so much and were absolutely heartbroken when we had to say goodbye. Bolivia might be the most underrated country in South America. Not that many people go there, and yet there is so much to see. One big thing though that everyone is talking about when talking about Bolivia is the Amazon. Yes, it is just as gigantic as you might think, and yes, there are mosquitoes. Is it worth it? Yes. Do we want to do it again? No. Colombia is so colorful. We had so much fun here exploring Bogota and Medellin. People say you either hate Medellin or you love it, and we certainly loved it. We also saw some beautiful nature in Valle de Cocora and Guatapé. To be honest, we had hoped to see many more places in Colombia and ended up missing quite a lot because I had issues with my retainers, which was, I think, our fourth or fifth teeth issues on the trip, and we were really annoyed about it, but luckily at the end an amazing doctor in Medellin was able to help and we could continue our trip. Arriving in Panama was a bit of a culture shock. Suddenly we felt like we were in the US. There was Starbucks, McDonald's everywhere, the taxi from the airport had air conditioning, and everyone spoke English. I had been adamant about going to Panama City because of the canal. Yes, that canal. If you are into engineering and want to see one of the biggest projects of humanity, you should definitely go. With Costa Rica, we have a somewhat interesting relationship. This was our third time visiting. We have the most wonderful friends there, so we will absolutely go back again. But as a country to travel, it can be a bit lacking and the price-performance ratio is not great. But this time we went just to spend time with our friends and hang out on the beach and by the pool, which is exactly what we did, and we loved every minute of it. Something that we had been dreaming of since forever was seeing a volcano erupt. Specifically seeing lava. Now, this is not super easy to achieve, but if you want to do it, there is one place where there is almost a guarantee for success, and that is Guatemala. So hiking up Acatenango to see Fuego erupt, which he does conveniently around every 15 minutes, was worth every meter of altitude that you have to hike up. Sadly, we were again not super lucky with the weather, but grateful that we got to see it at least for a couple of minutes. Next was our time spent exploring Mayan ruins, first in Guatemala and then later on in Mexico. Mexico is also famous for its cenotes, which can be so beautiful and very refreshing in the heat. Mexico was also where we took another break from traveling in Tulum, enjoying a nice apartment and recharging after 9 months of traveling in Latin America. Why we ended up going to Canada, I still don't really know. It was certainly never on our original wish list, and it also tore a huge hole into our budget, but it was so worth it. We were so happy to be back in a Western country. We felt so safe. Everyone was so friendly, which I think is one of the things that Canada is famous for. Some of our highlights were Niagara Falls, Toronto was such a great city, the Thousand Islands National Park, Quebec, and of course the Laurentian Mountains. In the US, we were able to fulfill another dream that we had been talking about for a long time, and together with family from back home nonetheless, and that was a road trip through the southern states. We covered around 2,500 kilometers and we went through 6 states: Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Florida. There is so much to learn here, so much history, so many places to see, but also so much music, good food, and of course some pretty decent beaches as well. In the end, we went to San Francisco for a week of exploring and some more sad history. Introducing Fiji. This is a honeymoon destination for a reason. There are many resorts to choose from, and we had never been on a honeymoon and had also never been in a resort before, so we decided to go for it and splurged on a couple nights on one of the many tiny islands off the coast of mainland Fiji. The tropical vacation ended with a bit of a drama as we got to experience our very first cyclone. Witnessing the weather go crazy was for sure a memorable moment, and our onward flight was 8 hours late, but because we had enjoyed such nice weather on the first couple days, we were kind of okay about it. What followed after Fiji was supposed to be our biggest adventure yet, and turned into somewhat of a disaster, which was, of course, traveling Australia in a van. Now, obviously, Australia is a wonderful country, but for us it came with so many challenges and issues. The awful weather, even though we had come during the right season. The cost, it was super difficult to find free camp spots. It was cold. We also at some point got tired of hiking, which seemed like the only activity to do and had never happened to us before. But mainly we struggled a lot with the van that we had bought, not so much with the car itself, but with the interior, which was just too small for us, not very well done, and also full of cockroaches. It got to a point where we, for the first time since about a year, started to talk about going home, ending the trip, not wanting to go on anymore. So after many weeks of trying to make things work, we decided to get the hell out of there, sold the car as quickly as we could, and left for Asia. We could not have made a better decision. Some people hate Bali. We loved it. The temples, the spirituality, the good food, the friendly people, the lush green everywhere, and the easiness of traveling in Southeast Asia. It was exactly what we needed and exactly what we got. Indonesia has 17,000 islands. Bali is just one of them, so we decided to give at least one more a shot, and that was Java. Java is totally different from Bali and home to two incredible temples, Prambanan and Borobudur, the latter one being the biggest Buddhist temple in the entire world. If you're ever in need to hang out somewhere for very little money in a very nice apartment, you want to go to Kuala Lumpur. The city is fun, there is everything you need, a couple things to see as well, and lots of shopping. We really enjoyed having a daily routine again, cooking our own food and recovering from yet another cold that we got in Indonesia. After that, we went on to explore some of what Malaysia has to offer, tea plantations in the mountains and insanely good food in Georgetown. Sometimes when traveling, you feel like you're visiting a different planet, and that can be so true for East Asia. We've experienced it before in China and Japan, but this time we went to Korea. Korea is awesome. We loved the city of Seoul so much. We stayed longer than initially planned, exploring all of the different neighborhoods and hiking up some of the city's peaks and trying different food and visiting all of the palaces and temples. Korea overall is really full of things to do as a tourist. Like, there's so much beautiful nature, and there's so many national parks and temples and palaces and heritage villages and museums, and there's some really big and interesting cities as well. The end of our trip through Korea, though, was a massive disappointment. We went to Jeju Island to see another one of the 7 wonders of the world, this gigantic crater in the ocean, and this was the view that we got after hiking up there. But how do you possibly know when to end your trip? For us, it became quite clear during our time in Korea. This was such a great country that we found so interesting, yet we could feel that we were somewhat exhausted. This feeling had been with us off and on again since Australia, but it got stronger and stronger to a point where it was hard to find the motivation to see and do stuff. So in Korea, we decided that the next country would be also our last, and that country was Thailand.